All right, Judges chapter 16. Remember at the very beginning there, it opens up with Samson going into a harlot. The men had decided to lay in wait for Samson in ambush. Somehow he found out about that. This is the occasion where in the middle of the night he went and grabbed the city gates and the posts and all and carried them away, and so he escaped. Just another display of his strength, but another tight spot he got into because of his uncontrolled passions, because of his immoral behavior. And what follows here in this account of Samson and Delilah is another occasion where we see that Samson's weakness for women got him into trouble, and this ended up bringing him down, of course. So we looked at the fact last week, verses 4 and 5, how that when he develops this relationship with Delilah, verse 5, the lords of the Philistines know about this, and they decide they're going to get to Samson through her, so they go and they offer her money, and it's 5 lords of the Philistines offering her 1,100 shekels of silver apiece, so 5,500 pieces of 5,500 pieces of silver. It's a lot of money that they're offering her in order to figure out how to get Samson, get to him, and of course they're eventually going to take him into custody. So let's read verses 6 through 14, Judges 16, 6 through 14, where it begins to unfold of how she's going to get this money. Elijah. Okay. So how does she initially approach him there in verse 6? Okay. Any other thoughts on that? Yeah, how can you be afflicted? This is her using her womanly charm to try to find out this secret. You know, you look at how it's phrased there. Please tell me where your great strength is. If I'm not mistaken, that's the last time she says please to him. But she says, please tell me. So she's approaching him in a very gentle manner, coming to him, you know, hey, what is it? How is it? Well, then when, of course, he tells her this, it's not the truth. He doesn't give up the secret of his strength. And she does that to him. Then you've got the lords of the Philistines who are there. And what are they doing in verse 9? Lying in wait. Where? What does this tell you? I mean, we kind of know it, but let's just spell it out for a second. Right. One thing is, this is not her where they're in place and she goes to him that day and says, hey, what's the secret of your strength? And then she finds that out and she reaches over in a box and pulls out bowstrings and ties him up, and then they're there. This is a process. We have it very shortly summarized for us here, but she has gotten this information. She's methodical. She goes out, she gets these bowstrings. She tells them there's a particular time, a particular day. They're in the house. She gets him in before Samson comes in because he doesn't realize they're there. Gets him in, ties him up. All of that unfolds. The Philistines are upon you. So she has been very cunning in what she's doing here. Hank. Well, we're going to talk about that. That here she's tried to approach him in a very subtle way in this first time, and tells him, let me know. And then the Philistines are upon you. He broke the bowstrings. He's, it doesn't bother him. There's no issue as far as his personal strength, his safety, all of that he overcomes. All well and good, let's say, at that point. Now, verse 10, how does she approach him the second time? Making fun of me? Is she in a good mood? She's hot. You've mocked me. You have told me lies. Now, please tell me how you may be bound. So she does use please again. But hey, you're not treating me right. Why would you do this? Anything in that shocks you or surprises you? She's playing the victim. Carrie? Right. Nancy. Right. We've been on this little merry-go-round before. He should know where it's headed, right? But she is going at him with this, you've mocked me, you've mistreated me, why are you acting this way toward me? As Nita said, she's playing that victim. So he gives her another answer, which is not the truth, in verse 11. Just get new ropes. Get new ropes and that'll be okay. Obviously, she doesn't know what unfolded before back in chapter 15, where when the men of Judah went down to arrest him, those 3,000 men that went down to arrest him, and he said, put new ropes on me. They took new rope, and that wasn't an issue for him. So it's like flax in the flame. But he tells her that, hey, you do that, that's what'll happen. So verse 12. What do we have the repeat of? They planned it. She's gotten the ropes. She ties him up. She's let the Philistines in. Everything again. This is no small matter. This is her being very methodical in getting this done. Well, then in verse 13, how does she approach him? Yeah, the please is gone. That is the place where the please drops. But she continues to press on this. You've mocked me. You told me lies. And so this is all your fault. You're the problem here, Samson. Why do you do like this? So he tells her, well, you weave the 7 locks of my head into the web of the loom. And of course, remember, being a Nazarite, very long hair. And what kind of surprises me is evidently how deeply this man sleeps. I can't imagine somebody tying up my hands a couple times while I'm sleeping, or getting, of course, I've never had hair that long, but even that, I mean, because it's not like weaving his hair into loom is a small thing. He has to be asleep near a loom. It's got to be a rather larger thing. But mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A good sleeper. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe, and maybe that overconfidence. He's just not, whatever, not a big deal. Huh. Well, and I think with the getting the initially the bowstrings, which would be like animal sinew and stuff, and then getting the ropes, that would take a little bit. Now she may have had a loom there in her home where she was staying, and that's part of what she does, either personally or sells the stuff. We really don't have a lot of information on her, but it's amazing that again and again. And he knows when that question comes, he knows she's going to attempt something. And he knows there are going to be Philistines around when he wakes up. He has to know. While in one sense you go, this guy is dumb as a rock, he's not. He's really, it's not like he doesn't realize this is where it's headed. He has to know that. I would argue that he does know it in the way that she says that the Philistines are upon you, and he's able to fend off his attackers. That's how I would take it. But she's definitely trying to find that secret, and she knows that after it's thwarted, he's not told me the truth, and he has to know. She's still seeking. She's still wanting to do me harm. But for whatever reason, he keeps going along with it. I think that also shows his weakness with her, that he's willing to endanger himself because he has this desire for her. Mike. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Wrong. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Right. Exactly. And that's the impression I get going through this. He's just like, yeah, there's nothing. I'll tell her this. I'll tell her that. Whatever she does, it's not going to work. And I know it's not going to work. And that, I'm good. Bruce? Yes, from start to finish here, from the Philistine wife to the harlot to Delilah, he's got a problem all through this, and it, like you say, it clouds his thinking and his rationality and gets him in trouble each time, every time. Paul, do you have something? Yes. Yes, he's sleeping when she does these various things to him and then awakens him. The Philistines are upon you. So it says that he pulled out the batten and the web from the loom. He's able to survive that. Third assassination attempt at this point, or I don't know if it's assassination because they take him into custody, but this third attempt to subdue him. All right, so let's read verses 15 to 22. So Judges 16, 15 to 22.
Then she said to him, how can you say, I love you, and your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times, and have not told me where your great strength lies. It came to pass, when she pestered him daily with her words, and pressed him, so that his soul was vexed to death, that he told her all his heart, and said to her, no razor has ever come upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb. If I am shaven, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak, and be like any other man. When Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up once more, for he has told me all his heart. So the lord of the Philistines came up to her and brought the money in their hand. Then she lulled him to sleep on her knees, and called for a man and had him shave off the 7 locks of his head. Then she began to torment him, and his strength left him. And she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. So he awoke from his sleep and said, I will go out as before at other times, and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. Then the Philistines took him and put out his eyes, and brought him down to Gaza. They bound him with bronze fetters, and he became a grinder in the prison. However, the hair of his head began to grow again after it had been shaven.
All right. So how does she approach him this time back in verse 15?
Well, she approaches him saying, if you loved me, you would have revealed this to me. And in this approach, she's trying to, of course, appeal to their relationship that they have. And we understand there is no love on her part. As she said, she's wanting him to be assassinated.
Okay. What So when she says, you don't love me, as Ron's saying, the implication of that is, like I love you. You don't love me. Why aren't you sharing this with me? But what is her motivation? It's not love. Money. Mike? Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's conflated these things, but it also tells you that after 3 attempts, he's still going back to see her. He's not slowed down here, evidently. And she uses emotional manipulation to try to get him to reveal this secret of his strength. Now, evidently, when she made that appeal in verse 15, and, you mocked me, you not told me, and this whining and complaining, that he doesn't tell her. Because it goes on to say, came to pass, she pestered him daily and pressed him. His soul was vexed to death. So it wasn't like the first time she approached him in this way that it worked, but she just keeps working on him over time, and she eventually grinds him down so that he then reveals what it is that is a secret of his strength. And just for a moment, let's think about what is it that he's saying is that secret. Ron? Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. The reason is God, the root cause, that Nazirite vow, putting him in a special relationship to God. That's what it was supposed to be. But you back all the way up to the beginning of his story, and you see where he disregards and diminishes that vow all along. And this revelation here is kind of that last straw that was a part of that vow that made him what he was, that made him a Nazirite and devoted to God. And he gives up the very last thing here, if you will. And that ends up being an issue. Mm-hmm. Right, right, exactly. The hair and then the shaving of the hair. Right, exactly right. A unique human being, creation of God that was treated distinctly from the mother, and she had to behave a certain way so that his Nazirite vow would be intact from that point going forward. Exactly right. Very good point on that. Well, it says that she lulled him to sleep and called for a man to come in and shave him. Again, I don't understand how that could happen, but it happened. Okay, there are some people who do sleep heavily, but she did it, shaved. What happens with him? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is that she's there, and maybe it is that she's stroking his arm or something, and he falls off asleep, and she stays there. She doesn't disturb him. The man comes in, shaves his head. That's kind of the picture in my mind of how that happens. And so he loses his strength because of that. It says she began to torment him in verse 19. The Philistines are there, and he awoke from his sleep. He thought, oh, it's no problem again. I'll throw them off and I'll be fine. But of course, it wasn't the case because he didn't understand. The Lord had left him. He doesn't have that superhuman strength, if you will, anymore. And so they took him, and what do? Put his eyes out. Any thoughts on that? Let me ask you that. Go ahead. Okay. If he's going to be handicapped in that way, being blinded now. Philip? Right. So it's interesting that they don't kill him. They keep him alive, as Philip is saying, as a form of humiliation, subjugation, and to send a message to people, here's what we're going to do with you. And look how we treat this great, powerful hero. And we've overcome him, Elijah. Yes. It emphasizes he saw a woman. And now he doesn't see anything, right? So that ability or that avenue of his failure is taken away at this point. So they take him, they gouge out his eyes, they put him in shackles, they put him into the prison. He's a grinder in the prison in there. So the question is, do you suppose Samson would have given his secret up if he knew that his eyes are going to be gouged out, he would be shackled and put into a prison to be a grinder, and then, as we're going to see here in just a minute, to be mocked? Any lesson there? Carrie? Yeah, the way it describes it there, when he says, I'm a Nazarite, no razors ever come upon my head. If I'm shaven, verse 17, then my strength will leave me. I shall become weak like any other man. You do have to wonder how much did he understand that? Because she realized when he fessed up on that, oh, he told me the truth here. Did he think he would lose his strength in a week or a month or whatever? But it took him down at that point, Elijah. Okay, I'm following you, Ron.
So we may not see those consequences. This is a physical association that he had with God and then
Yes, and it also tells us when it says he didn't know the Lord had left him, it wasn't a feeling and emotion. It wasn't like, ooh, I just shuddered and, things like that. It was something that through his life, it was there. But, today people want to associate a relationship with God as some type of emotion, some type of feeling, or, something that affects your body, I guess. And that's not the way that it was here. He didn't realize it. But until he took action, and then the consequence became very apparent, the situation. Cruz and then Zach. Right. Yeah, he had disrespected that vow all along, and now he just completely throws it away. Thanks.
why now is the vow all of a sudden? Why did God leave him now? Because in all the ways he already broken the vow, and God was merciful and gracious and let him maintain his strength? Or was it all along that the hair, the shaving of the head, was the true test of keeping the vow? Everything else were milestones to that ultimate failure. Where, as God sees sin as sin, he broke the vow on day one, as it were. But it wasn't until the last element of the vow being broken that God left it.
Yeah, I see it as that there's multiple things in the vow that were required for the vow, and this is kind of the last thing that he chucks, and there's nothing left. He's violated all along and has all these issues. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Where that vow is delineated there in Numbers chapter 8, exactly. And so he's done all these other things, and now this issue with shaving the head, the vow's over, the vow's broken, it's done, all of that. Ron, do you have something? Mm-hmm. Exactly right. And people, they get in these modern worship services and they get all hyped up and they think, well, that's God moving, God doing something. And that's not what it's about. It's about God's word, that vow that's delineated there, keeping that vow. That's when God is with you, when you keep the vow. So just thinking about the Samson being blinded because of his passion, that he's willing to give up that vow and not really think about there's a consequence on the other side of that I'm going to have to deal with. I'm going to have to pay the consequences here. And so we need to take this as a warning and foresee and think about when there's that temptation in front of us, there's something on the other side of that we do not want. The gouging out of the eyes, the being put in shackles, the imprisonment, the mocking that takes place. We don't want that. So we got to think about it now and not give up the vow. and it has its intended effect. Let's read verses 23 to 25, please. Judges 16, 23 to 25. Who's got that? Carter, you want that? All right. So they brought him into this temple. They're offering this sacrifice to Dagon, their god. And that was like a fish-human hybrid type of god, but it's just one of their false gods. They're in there, and when they bring Samson out, and they're praising their God, thinking their God's the one who delivered him, and they're unaware that it's because Jehovah God, the true God, left him, not their God, because their God is nothing, no power there. It's because Jehovah God had left him, and they call to bring him out there. Why is it that they want him there? Verse 25. Be a spectacle. To bring him out, mock him, make fun of him. You know, here's this great hero, and look at him now. He's in shackles, and his eyes have been gouged out. He's an object of ridicule and mockery. Well, then, let's read 26 to 30. Ron, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
And we also know that it was greed, bribery, manipulation, the cunning that Samson ultimately ended up departing his relationship with God.
Right, because he gave up on God, gave up his vow to God. When he was pestered day by day, he gave that up. You know, the Lord promised back in the book of Joshua, we see it repeated in Hebrews 13, I will never leave you nor forsake you. The Lord is with us as long as we are with him. And here's a stark example when somebody has really abandoned the Lord abandoned them. And it wasn't through the power of this false god out here. And there's no power that Satan has that can take us and defeat us unless we yield, unless we give up. And I think this is a great example of that. All right, 26 to 30. Who's got that for us? Go ahead, Zach.
And Samson said to the young man who held him by the hand, let me feel the pillars on which the house rests, that I may lean against them. Now the house was full of men and women. All the lords of the Philistines were there, and on the roof there were about 3,000 men and women who looked on while Samson entertained. Then Samson called to the Lord and said, O Lord God, please remember me, and please strengthen me only this once, O God, that I may be avenged on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. And Samson grasped the 2 middle pillars on which the house rested, and he leaned his weight against them, his right hand on one and his left hand on the other. And Samson said, let me drive at the Philistines. And he bowed with all his strength, and the house fell on the Lord and all the people who were in it. For the dead whom he killed at his death were more than those whom he had killed during his life.
All right. So Samson gets the young man who's with him there, take me to the pillars. He has evidently some kind of knowledge about this building. I don't know if in his lifetime he had seen it, but he knew somehow these pillars were key pillars in that building. And he gets over there, says, put me to it, because remember, back in verse 22, it said his hair began to grow again. And he understands there's strength returning now, and I'm going to seek God's help to bring this thing down. But it's interesting that he appeals to God in this. It seems that the blinding, the shackling, the imprisonment, all of this has had its effect that he's now been humbled. He realizes he needs God, and he appeals to God. for help and strength, and God is a source of his help and his strength. And so that happens. You got the lords of the Philistines there. You got these 3,000 up on the terrace, if you will. He pushes them, brings it all down, and he cried out, "Let me die with the Philistines." Now, the question I want to ask, number 6 on the sheet there was Samson's death a suicide?
No, it was not. I believe it was an act of war, which he was engaged with. And if it was suicide, that God assisted in suicide, and I don't think God can do that as well. This is not assisted suicide. And he reestablishes, as you said, his vow with God, and he stays here, and appeals to him. But as we have seen elsewhere, righteous men have died engaging their enemies.
Yes, exactly right. Mike. Yes, he realizes there's an opportunity here for me to strike against the pagans. As the Lord had told his parents, he will begin to deliver them from the hand of the Philistines. And there's an opportunity right here, as it states for us in plain language, he killed more in his death than he did in his life. This is the single biggest blow he can strike against the enemies of God's people, those who are oppressing the people of God. And so, as Ron said, this is an act really more on the side of military campaign and a war versus a personal thing. I'm disgusted with life. I'm done with life. I don't see any hope. Let me end it now. That's not his attitude at all. Who committed suicide in the Bible? Judas did. We know that in the New Testament. What was his attitude in all of that? Yeah, I betrayed innocent blood. He tried to give the money back. They didn't accept it, of course. And he goes out and he hangs himself. Saul, King Saul, fell on his sword, right? Because he said, all hope is lost and I'm done. He didn't die in battle. He got wounded in battle, but then he took his own life after his armor bearer wouldn't do it. And there are a couple of other examples like that, but this doesn't fit that pattern at all. This is more like, I don't know if any of you have read the book, you heard the story about Lieutenant Michael Murphy. It's a book called Seal of Honor. And he was the guy, the other side of that is lone survivor, Marcus Luttrell, in the War on Terror and the Navy SEAL unit. But the account is that Mike Murphy, the leader of that group, that they were in a bad position. He left cover to go out so he could get a radio signal, so he could get communication and call in help. But he knew he would be exposed to enemy fire. He was going out into the open. But he did that knowing there's a high probability I'm going to die, but I need to get out there to call in help for my guys. I liken it to that. He knows, I know I'm going to die. I bring this temple down, I'm going to die. But it's not because he's given up on life. It's because of his faith in God. Go ahead. Yes. Exactly. And one of the things that we want to be very clear about, suicide is not the answer to problems. The only thing suicide ends up doing is cementing those problems. They don't get resolved. Whatever that is, if it's financial, if it's relationships, if it's your failure, your sin in your life, it doesn't resolve that at all. All it does is lock that in place in the story of your life. So you should never, ever contemplate that. You should always turn your heart and mind to God. And if things are dark in your life, seek God, seek help from other people. Because there are some people who try to use Samson as, Samson killed himself. No, that's not what we're reading here. He's a man of faith. Hebrews chapter 11. And to Ron's point, God did not assist in his suicide. He did. It's just not there. All right, any other thoughts? Yes, it was a merciful thing. So very good point there. We may go through extremely difficult, painful experiences in life, but it's God's way of working that we would turn to him, depend on him, and trust in him. Cruz. Right. God had an overruling hand in his providence and working to use Samson for his means and for his ends and his plan for his people. And Samson is just one man here that we have a lot of detail about the nasty, ugly, dark things in his life. But we want to understand that every man, solely a man, that the Lord has used has been a sinner. Every single one. And he can use us not to excuse our sin, to Cruz's point, but we need to understand God still wants us to serve him, put the sin behind us, humble ourselves, look to him, and serve him, and we can do great things as well. All right, Lord willing, we'll pick up Micah and the Danites and the idolatry. Lord willing, next week.